Subscribe to The Honest Critique for current affairs, movie, book, and product reviews. Also, make sure you press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the video series are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily represent those of The Honest Critique and its employees. The following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers. Viewer discretion advised.
So for all the people who will be watching it, so Meghnad is the clan chief of the Link tribe that people are so much fascinated. They want to know about this. He's a part-time civics teacher, and he's an executive editor with Newslaundry and
associate editor.
Yes. I correct myself. Associate editor with Newslaundry, and you can find him anywhere on YouTube, to the podcast, to his blogs. So when are we seeing you back, by the way, with those YouTube streams?
With YouTube streams. So streams have been put on pause for a bit because too much effort, man. Also I have a lot of work to do. So I was trying to juggle my day job and then trying to see if I can stream on my free time. But now I realize that streaming is a full-time job and I already have a job. So, I do sometimes, talk to people on my Discord server, etc., whatever. But other than that, I can't give much time. So if I can dedicate more time, then I would love to stream more, but unfortunately I can't.
So I learned this ice-breaking question from someone and I thought I should experiment with you. So since you have a tribe and you're building up a tribe.
Cult! I have a cult.
Okay, a cult.
Tribe is noob level stuff. I have a cult.
Okay, I have a cult. So do you find yourself being the prime minister of the country someday?
No, man. No. Not at all.
But you asked the same question to Rajiv and I was watching.
I know. You're cheating. You're just stealing my icebreaker question and asking it to me. No, man. The thing is, when I was younger, and I'm from Nagpur, right?
RSS.
Yes, pretty much. But I have people from family in RSS and I know a few RSS people, etc. But we were mostly away from politics, and our visualization of a politician was always like Amrish Puri from Nayak. Okay, so when I got this fellowship called LAMP, where when I came to Delhi, my parents were like, "Ye Amrish Puri ke saath kaam karega? What is this? Why are you working with politicians?" But I was like, "Hey, I am not good at anything, and these guys are also not good at anything. So clearly, I can be like them. So maybe I have political ambitions." So I was like, "Yes, politics mein ghusna hai, and bahut kaam karna hai, all that stuff." But gradually, as you experience more things, as you meet more people, as I worked with more MPs and I heard their stories, I was like, "Ye mere se nahi hone wala." A, I don't have the face. B, I don't have the money. C, I don't have the power. So in all of these things, if I get all these three things at the same time, plus I get some luck on top of it, then maybe you'll see me in politics one day, but very unlikely. So initially I didn't want to, but now I'm being more realistic and thinking that I don't even plan too much in the future anymore. I plan mostly a month ahead, 2 months ahead, but किसको पता है 10 साल बाद क्या होने वाला है, किसको पता है 50 साल बाद क्या होने वाला है.
But the only problem you want to have if you join politics is because you already are in a media eye. You won't have to get this Bal Narendra comic stories that you can make up.
I'll have to make something else up though. That's the problem. मुझे भी stories बेचने पड़ेंगे ना खुद के. Some stories बेच के ही तो बड़े होते हैं. So I'll have to come up with something of my own. Maybe then we will have VR and shit, and then I will be having a virtual experience with Meghnad. You can be POV, Meghnad's POV, when he was 15 years old and he was in school and he got beaten up by his Hindi teacher. Experience it. Feel his pain. Maybe that one day. Thank you for giving me the idea.
So Muskaan, you want to start with the formal first question.
Formal conversational question.
क्या रे format?
Meghnad, but like very simply, like we all have known what's been happening inside the parliament right now, and given the entire COVID situation, also how things have changed in the way the parliament is functioning. So one very prominent thing which some news channels covered, not all, but which we'd like you also to talk a little bit about maybe, is with doing away with the question hour and introducing written replies. So, I mean, one thing that really strikes out is if you're introducing written replies, do you think it's more done in like just for formality? Or do you think that those written replies actually will have substance which wouldn't have been covered in the question hour as such? So it's like a good proxy for it.
It's really interesting because so initially, if you remember the sequence of events, they had said that no question hour, right? Matlab written bhi nahi and oral bhi nahi, right? Then there was like massive outrage from the MPs. And the reason why they found out was because they went to file the questions, right? So they 15 din pehle you have to file a question. So they went to file it and they're like, question hour hone hi nahi wala hai. I'm like, so everybody was like, what is happening? Why is there no question hour? So then bahut outrage hua, bahut ye hua. So the reason they gave was, social distancing, staff aayega, whatever. But then they were like, then keep it written. So they were like, okay, fine. So we'll give written answers then. So question hour oral was cancelled. So now there are two differences between oral and written, right? When you are selected for a starred question, which is the oral answering, the minister has to be there and has to answer your questions, right? First, your question is answered, the original question by the minister. And then after that, you're allowed to ask supplementary questions, which means that you can counter question the minister. And you get 2 chances. And then 2 other MPs also are given chances to ask counter questions on your question. So it's like in 1 hour, they usually deal with like 7-8 questions. And that's on a good day. So usually it's like 5 to 8 questions. But even that is a lot. Like even as making a minister respond to like questions on these things is a lot, right? So in the written though, only the original written answer is coming to you, right? So then you can write to the minister, or like you can file a motion saying that I don't like this answer, can the minister please respond, etc. But that's a long process and that is usually never approved. So accountability wise and visually, like when you see a minister answering, even the people watching are like, matlab government ko questions pooch rahe hai, it's good that the minister has to answer, right? Now that didn't happen. So written answers are fine, but then I was still like, chalo kuch to de rahe, like abhi bar itna low ho gaya ki we are like, chalo kuch to de rahe ki at least written answers to denge is bar. But if you see the answers that they're giving, they are also useless, right? No data on migrant labor deaths, no data on doctor deaths, no data on compensation given. So even that becomes a little pointless, right? So my assumption then was that maybe they were just not prepared for question, or that's why they were not willing to hold it, or what. Like they didn't have the data and they knew these are the first questions that will come up. But then like brazenly they just said, nahi hai data. So what are you supposed to do after that exactly, right? Except for like create outrage online, or journalists will report on it. The few journalists that are left report on it and talk about it or outrage about it. But it's very scary when you think about it, how institutionally speaking, Parliament has been getting weaker and weaker and weaker over time. And every session that you see is just even worse. And that's exactly what happened.
So maybe in your opinion, it is like the written replies, even though that they're coming in, they don't carry much substance in them. So unka jo purpose hai, is that purpose being fulfilled in some way? Or like you said, kuch to mil raha hai, kuch nahi mil raha. So
kuch to mil raha hai, exactly. So like, if you look at the answers, of course you will get some information from the government, right? It's not like they completely like said ki hamare paas kuch bhi nahi hai, like to every question, right? That's not true. Like these are the few important questions which they didn't have answers for, which I pointed out, right? Of course, they had answers for other questions. You can go to the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha website and do the question search, and you will find like a ton of answers on a lot of other things. I'm not saying that they didn't give any answers, right? But the oral answers bit was very important, because then your MP actually gets to counter question the minister on certain things, right? Which is important. Like, now they are just giving one answer, you have to read it and you have to accept it, right? Session to chalu hai nahi, but like you have to just accept it. So that is a little problematic. It's like the government has the last word, whereas the citizen should have the last word, and that is through the representative.
So I have a question. It's I think it's your I think your next to next. I think the batch which you're in PR is the LAMP fellow. Were in 2013, right? 2013.
I was in 2011. I was the first 2011.
Batch. Okay, you're the first batch.
First batch of LAMP. Yeah.
Okay, so the 4 years later, I think you know him as well. He worked with the BJP for some time. Shivam Singh.
Yes.
He actually brought this thing on questionnaire. He brought us statistics and he put this game theory.
Yeah,
and
I read that. Yeah, how people can game the questionnaire. Yes.
Exactly. So, how feasible is it? Like, I mean, I know that a lot of MPs do not ask questions. Like, if you go to the PRS website as well, you will see a lot of the MPs, which even my MP as well. I won't name the person, but does not ask question. Like, I have not seen her asking any question.
But that's the thing, like, so it depends on what your priorities are as an MP also. So what Shivam had written was actually accurate, and I was very shocked that nobody else actually saw this, because so funnily enough, he worked with Mr. PD Rai and I also used to work with Mr. PD Rai, so I knew him through that. It's very interesting what he found, that whenever questions get clubbed together, multiple MPs, there is more chance of it showing up in the oral answers list, right? But now that there were no oral answers, so even that doesn't matter. So I guess. So it's possible to game the system. It's possible to game any system. Like systems are made to be gamed. Sometimes I feel like that. And what I think the thing is that it depends on the priority of your MPs, right? So some MPs actually care about their performance in Parliament and their attendance and their questions and the amount of times they speak and the amount of times they participate, etc. So I have worked with MPs both ways. Like, they care a lot, so they will work you really hard to make sure that you file like 10, 15 questions every single day, no matter where you get it from, etc. Or they will be the other side, where they'll be like super lax. They will not care about what is like how many questions to file or whatever. They will file an occasional question, like Rahul Gandhi. मतलब ऐसे ही मन में आया तो कभी-कभी file कर देते हैं types. And that is also a thing. So again, like, think about it. Like, Rahul Gandhi question file करे, ना file करे, attend करे, ना करे, there will be certain section of people which will still vote for him, right? I mean, Amethi did not vote for him this time, but that was not because of his parliamentary performance. I can assure you that. But people of Wayanad did vote for him. So nobody looks at parliamentary performances much, no? So that's the whole point. Like, if citizens start looking at parliamentary performances, then MPs would actually care कि they're looking at what questions I'm asking. And especially if the questions are related to their constituency and the problems that people are having, that can actually be used as a great, political tool as well. That, oh, this is a question I asked on your behalf because you were asking me this question. And this is the response that the government has given. But उतना I think evolve नहीं हुए हैं अभी तक. Like, I mean, of course, there are a few MPs which do this actively. I've seen them do this, but mostly it doesn't matter. I mean, in their heads, in the people's heads, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. But all this, okay, go.
Yeah, I just have a very, very small follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Meghnad, you said it doesn't matter, but I think what I would like to ask you is, should it matter?
Of course it does. So, like, when I say when it doesn't matter, I'm saying that currently it doesn't matter, right? So, like, I always look at democracies as, like, if you want to look at it, human years, right? So, every 10 years of a democracy is 1 human year. So, like, if 70 saal ho gaye, so we are like 7 years old right now. Imagine a 7-year-old child. What can you expect from a 7-year-old child? They're just gaining awareness that there is some other world outside themselves. Like, if you imagine that way, right? They're like in like what, KG2? KG2, but about to go in first standard right now in the official schooling system, right? And if you look at like America, it's like a 20-year-old or like just got out of their teenage years and whatever, they're just going into the world, etc. Britain usse bhi zyada. So You get my point, right? Like, so there are way more mature democracies which have gotten a lot more time for the idea of democracy to seep into the people, right? We haven't had that much time, right? Like, for instance, I know, like, how old are you guys, if I may ask?
We're American age. American.
No, but like just an estimate, you're like 20.
22, 22,
Yeah.
22.
2022, right? 2022. So, like,
Yeah.
I mean, even your grandparents will have stories of independence if you ask them, right? Ki, haan, main tha. Like, my grandfather used to tell him he was in Delhi during the independence. He was like, I was on a tree when the midnight speech happened outside the parliament. He was just hanging on a tree and waiting for Nehru to come out. That sort of stories, right? Think about it. We are just one generation removed from that point, right? Next generation is like another generation removed, right? So we still have that, our grandparents still have that trauma in their head of being ruled, right? Then our parents still got like first-hand stories from them constantly. Ki, haan, mere time pe ye hua tha. We still got like second-hand stories, right? So we are still not relating that much to the independence, but we are still closer to that struggle that happened. Now, next generation which comes in will be completely devoid of it. Like, they'll be like, मुझे भी नहीं पता कि मेरे grandfather ने ज़्यादा क्या किया था, तो what will I pass on to my children? And then a generation after that, and after that. And that is when people actually get comfortable with democracy, right? Authoritarianism, authorities, people are still afraid of authorities everywhere. And I think we are still yet to sort of grasp the concept of we are superior, they are not. They are our servants, we are the masters. I think that hasn't happened yet, but it will happen eventually. So your question, should it be important? Yes, but it has this whole thing attached to it.
Ratnadeep?
Yeah. So, like every institution wants to show itself productive in a certain way. So there's the parliament. But over the period of time you have seen, it's especially a few days back we have seen bills out of bills for this past, like a footballer scoring in an open ground without any opposition involved in it. So every bill was passed without any difference from the opposition because it wasn't there in the first place. So from 2014, if I can give you statistics, is a total of 131 bills have passed and 44 finance and appropriation bills in the last 5 years against 116 and 43 in UPA, which is far higher than this. But the way that we have shown productivity, especially I was referring to the PRS website when they have done parameters with the number of it's a very simple calculation that done is the total number of hours allocated and the total number of hours that's been done without any kind of ruckus being created and been cancelled.
You're just stealing my statistics only, हाँ? आराम से मेरी statistics चुरा के तू बोल दे बस. मतलब मैं भी तो यही लेके आया था. बोल. Tell. It's okay.
But yeah. I'll give you a chance.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the way that we have categorized the productivity, is that kind of problematic, especially because Lok Sabha to aise hi uska full they have the numbers, even if all the allies of BJP move out, still they have the numbers to pass any bill. Rajya Sabha becomes problematic, and we have seen what happens with Rajya Sabha. You throw the opposition members out and then you pass the bill.
So it's it's weird because sometimes one of my ex-bosses used to say that people think that Parliament is a soap factory where it's like, they are just constantly producing soap and people are getting it and they're washing themselves with it and then they feel good about it. Because it is like that, right? People treat it like a manufacturing plant. कि अरे कितने बिल निकले, कितना टाइम हुआ, कितना बजट खर्च हुआ इस सेशन पे, बताओ हमको सब कुछ, right? So and journalists fall for this trap so hard that इतने hours हो गए ये session में, तो इसको if we divide it by the number of money spent on it, then we will know exactly how much money has been spent per voter. क्या मिलेगा उससे तुमको exactly, या फिर how much time was spent on a bill. I think that is a more important statistic, right? If you look at it overall, and I think you must have looked at it definitely now, that since the first Lok Sabha, if I get those figures correctly, 3,900 hours were spent on one session, which is a 5-year period of one Lok Sabha. right? Which has reduced to around 1600 hours in the last Lok Sabha, which is 16th Lok Sabha. So from that amount of time that was being spent on legislations and deliberations and debates and parliaments, to now we are down to less than half, right? So overall, you will see like a gradual decline over time, where number of days in which the session is held is less, number of hours given to each legislation is less, and on top of it, the number of bills being sent to committees is also less, right? So another statistic is that before the Modi government, around 60 to 70% of the bills were sent to standing committee. In the 16th Lok Sabha, in committees, not just standing committees, but in the next Lok Sabha, around 25% were sent. So, I mean, again, such a drastic reduction of deliberation and studying, right? So, study is an important thing. But like overall, if you feel it's just like everybody is in such a hurry nowadays, right? You know, it's like I always give this example. Please forgive me. I'm like I like telling stories, so please. So it's like, you know, how if we are in a skyscraper, which is like all like raddi, we are living in like on like the top floors, whereas the niche ka floors are completely dirty, filthy, crowded, no sewage, no electricity. But we are on top. We have our Starbucks and golf courses, so we are great. But what we are doing is we are not looking down. We are not looking at the vulnerable. We are not looking at the have-nots, right? We are always looking up at the development, at like basically mall ban raha hai upar hamare liye, wo chahiye humko. And we look at the building on the side which is shiny, and we're like, mere ko aisa hi building chahiye, right? And we are in such a hurry to get there that everything is like, nahi bill, अरे क्या बात करना है, पास कर दो, अरे हाँ ये बिल, अरे नहीं क्या बात करना है, ऑर्डिनेंस पास कर दो, you know, अरे पार्लियामेंट नहीं चल रहा है, क्या बात कर रहे हो, ठीक है, ऐसे ही वैसे ही डाल दो, you know, like, so it's like law making is now a race, you know, like reform 370 हटा दो, किसी से बात नहीं करना है, फार्म बिल्स 3 बिल्स एक साथ लाके पास कर दो, किसी से बात नहीं करना है, you know, आधार money bill pass kar do, kisi se baat nahi karna hai. And because there are a certain amount of people who feel like they know everything now, like, you know, like they know everything, they have jagat gyanis, they are like awesome, they understand India, and you know, people of India are with me, aise bol diya to sab kuch chalta hai basically, right? And if you say anything against them, then you're not people of India anymore. So if you look at it from that context, it's like everybody is in such a hurry that this process is also hurt by it, because legislation, law making is a very deliberate process, right? Motor Vehicles Act is a great example of how good policy making is done. You know, like it took like around 3 years for that bill when it came in, then standing committee, then amendments, then another round of standing committee, then again amendments, and now we have a great Motor Vehicles Act, right? You know, it's like no flaws, but the very little flaws, I would say, but like everything has been thought through before implementing it. Now it doesn't happen because everybody is in a hurry. Everybody wants everything right now. There is no patience. Everything has to be hurried through. And when it comes to lawmaking, that is extremely dangerous, because when you're in a hurry, you miss out on so many things that you do not even anticipate. One example, this is not lawmaking, but it's relevant, is the lockdown. You know, lockdown jab hua tha, so you tell me, like, so Modi ji came on TV, he said 12 baje se whatever lockdown jari ho jayega and nobody can get out, whatever stringent lockdown. What did you guys think immediately?
Apun Bhagwan hai.
Yeah, Muskaan, what did you think?
For me, so it was an abuse, which I'm not permitted to say on this channel.
No, but you know, that's the thing. So like, I think, you know, you're not giving enough credit to the psychology involved in it, because coronavirus tha, pandemic time tha, you can see that worldwide there are lockdowns happening. So in your head, you're also thinking, हाँ ये ठीक ही हुआ है. मतलब obviously social distancing करना पड़ेगा. Like even reasonable people like us, they were like, नहीं, obviously social distancing करना पड़ेगा. Obviously there has to be, you know, there are measures taken like this only. तो अच्छा किया है, right? मेरे दिमाग में तो आया था, to be honest. Like मेरे दिमाग में तो आया था कि नहीं, ये तो करना ही चाहिए था, because first thing you have to separate people, slow down the virus, etc. Second thing you have to do is basically build up your public health capacity, right? and then, like build like a structure, all of that. But then 15 days later, you realize how messed up you are, right? Because if you were a migrant worker at that point of time, you wouldn't be thinking like that. You'd be thinking, मेरा कल का खाना कहाँ से आएगा, boss? मेरा कल का basically what the hell am I supposed to do for 21 days now? Like घर पे बैठ के like इतना चावल है मेरे पास, मैं क्या करूँगा? Like निकल नहीं सकते, महामारी आई हुई है, सब मर जाएंगे. Like, do you imagine the amount of pressure? And then of course they started walking. Everything was good, but it's walked for miles, right? Like across states like crazy. They walked, and it was scary to watch because as a normal person, it is not my job to anticipate these things, to be honest. I'm just one person. But as a government, you should be able to anticipate the effects of what you are doing to 1.2 billion people, right? You cannot give it a few hours to be implemented and then figure out how jo hoga wo dekha jayega types. And now we see that it didn't even stop the virus. So kya exactly, basically, right? So that's why I'm saying that if you do things in a hurry without thinking through, there can be disastrous consequences which we can't even anticipate. Like even I can't anticipate, who feels like I study or like I'm aware or whatever. But nobody can anticipate.
There were like 15 ordinance, right? That was passed during this entire lockdown.
Yes. So the constitutional limit for holding sessions is you can't go beyond 180 days between two sessions. So you have to hold a parliament session after every 180 days or less, right? So they started this parliament session on the 175th day of their deadline. And in the middle, they passed, I think, 11 ordinances, if I'm not wrong. But during the session, they cleared 25 bills. In the last 2 days in Rajya Sabha, 13 bills were passed without the opposition present, right? And this includes the labor code and stuff. So it's crazy, right? And that's the thing. So then they were like, humne to bill pass kar diya. And everybody's like, great, well done. तुम्हारा तो यही काम है, बिल ही तो पास करना है, और क्या करना है तुमको? वहां पे बैठ के बटन ही तो दबाना है. वो तो बटन भी नहीं दबाने दिया अभी. वॉइस वोट करवा दिया. और जल्दी वो बटन दबाने में 15 मिनट जाते हैं, तो वो भी हटा दो. वॉइस वोट.
Maybe just tying back to the productivity part, like it's very evident why the rate like of passage of bills are done so quickly. It's to tie in with your next election cycle that's going to come up, right? So now if you think about it, according to you, like in your opinion, because whatever bills are being passed now, it's not sure if the same government is going to face the consequences of it in the next cycle. So according to you, what measures or what can be done to firstly actually quantify what a productive parliament is, and secondly to ensure that the people making those laws are the ones who are going to eventually take responsibility of what they pass?
So here's the thing, like I think people tend to see every government as a political party, right? Which I think is completely wrong, right? So government is a continuous process, right? So like the government we had from 1947 is still the government, like that's the point. Like it's that long, right? Because the policies are never made in isolation, right? So मनरेगा जो यूपीए ने शुरू किया था वो मोदी जी भी यूज करेंगे, right? And future governments भी शायद यूज करेंगे, right? आधार जो मोदी जी ने पास किया वो future governments भी यूज करेंगे और worse तरीके से यूज करेंगे. We don't know what they will do, right? Like right now we are afraid that they are tracking us, whatever. But then like next government will be like embed कर दो, barcode लगा दो सर पे, whatever, like you should have like a barcode with your Aadhaar number. You never know where we will go after this, right? I mean, think about it. Like just think about it, right? If you just think about the farm bill right now, right? The 3 bills that were passed. A productive way to pass these farm bills would be do proper stakeholder consulting, right? Which they claim to have done through multiple standing committees. ठीक है, I give them that. APMC के बारे में बात किया, reform के बारे में बात किया, whatever जो भी किया. Now they bring in this bill, right? Now the bill, whether or not it had taken views from earlier standing committees, we don't know, and it shouldn't matter because they passed it as an ordinance. Right? Now an ordinance, once it's passed, it's law. So there is no question of changing it anymore. Right? After the parliament comes to power, they asked for it to be sent to a select committee. They refused because हो गया, मतलब 6 महीने से तो चल रहा, 3 महीने से तो चल रहा था, वो law ही था वो. Like people must have done whatever they want during those 3 months. How does it matter? So a productive way to do this would be A, don't pass an ordinance, B, do stakeholder consulting, C, send it to a standing committee, and standing committee में और stakeholder consulting होगा. Now here's the thing, people seem to assume that APMC laws are applicable like everywhere in a similar way. That's not true. Bihar mein APMCs were removed in 2006, right? Maharashtra mein APMCs were removed right before the lockdown, right? There are multiple ways in which APMCs operate across states, right? In different ways. Now, if we have already done so many experiments with APMCs, what was the harm in figuring out which state functioned the best and then applying it across the nation? It's like a pilot project, right? You know, like, यहाँ पे ये APMC ऐसा चल रहा है, यहाँ पे APMC है ही नहीं, यहाँ पर ये हुआ. तो which state actually saw farmers doing better? What were the reasons? What were the geographical factors? What were the crops involved? And there are enough researchers to do that. The government can do whatever they want. Now that would be a reasonable policy making process, right? And then taking farmers into confidence is also important, because then that one state which did better with that whatever model of APMC, which we don't know right now, they can actually say that, no, look, it worked here, so it will work in your state also, and your state also, and your state also. Let's try it out. Like, कोशिश तो करके देखते हैं, एक हाथ दो डिस्ट्रिक्ट में डाल के देख लेंगे क्या होता है. You know, like that way. So reform is great. You know, liberalization of agriculture is great. I'm against government regulations also. Like, I think that in theory, this is a good idea, like removing APMCs and regulation. But in theory, in implementation, it might be a disaster, and you don't know what will happen, who will take over small farms, what company is going to come in, and how much resources they will have, where they will get resources from, under what. It's very hard to imagine. And you don't even know if this government will actually do these things. Maybe 10 years down the line is when you will see this effect, where one gigantic corporation which just showed up from nowhere is just like suddenly monopolizing agriculture or a particular crop, right? Now that's scary, right? And these are the things that should be anticipated, and policymakers should do this. But unfortunately, nobody thinks this much anymore.
So if I could just make a small contrast, so the amount of words that Advaniji spoke from 9 to 14, that's something around 35,926, if I'm not wrong. That's the amount of what he spoke. Okay. And it decreased to 365 words only. So from 2014 to 2019. That's how also how the amount of debates in Parliament decreased with Advaniji. The number of words that he spoke.
Okay, that's a weird statistic. But then Advaniji was in a different place then. His life was good. अभी तो मार्गदर्शक है, तो मार्गदर्शक थोड़ी कुछ बोलते हैं ज़्यादा. Like, when I'm older and I'm a margdarshak, I will say wise things in one lines, okay? So, I mean, I won't have to give such long stories and dialogues because I would have already given them. Now other people will give them. So I'll be like, एक sentence में बता देगा and you interpreted them.
Yeah. But for all our viewers, actually, you mentioned one of those Starbucks thing that on this, it was actually, I actually watched your TED Talks there, the skyscraper of democracy. So I request all the people to go and watch that, because you really well explain how the entire system works in the parliament, I mean, in the parliamentary procedures and all, with legislation, bureaucracy and everything. So just go and watch, everyone who's watching this one as well. So Muskaan, you have a question?
Yeah, so maybe moving on, we've figured out how the parliament, trying to figure out how the parliament currently works. Now, something else that is happening is the way parliament has changed its functioning. They've got into more digital parliament, right? It's become all online. So now we were talking about productivity. So is it possible with, you know, the kind of ruckus created in like when we have normal parliamentary sessions. But when you have digital parliament, do you see this something that is a long-term game for how parliament is going to function in the future? And will that be more productive than, you know, the current in-person parliament that we had before COVID?
It's really difficult to say because technically we still don't have a digital parliament, right? I mean, like digital parliament would be like over Zoom or whatever a bunch of people are talking or jo bhi hai. Even committees didn't allow, like, I think digital committees or something. I'm not sure about that, but we'll have to check. No, I know. Okay, so it wasn't allowed because I think I read Shashi Tharoor complaining about that also, that at least committees ko to virtually bithao. I'm not entirely sure if that is effective or not because I don't think we have seen enough evidence yet of whether it will work or not, right? Other countries are trying it, but again, that was during the pandemic period, right? Ideally, you would want like all representatives to come in the same space and then have a forum where you would have these discussions, right? If you are sitting here with a fancy shirt and like in a chaddi and then talking about proper legislations, I don't know, it just feels weird when I think about it. That an MP talking like this, it's just weird. And maybe I'm becoming very old school or whatever, but I think, you know, I would like, if you compare it with one thing, like, you know, have you been to like these stand-up shows lately on Zoom? Have you ever been to one?
Oh, I did one with Rida, I remember.
Yeah, so like wahan pe it's interesting because on a stage the person has a mic and the other people don't. So like their voice is amplified, other people's are not. But when you're in Zoom, everybody has the mic and everybody can talk at the same time. So there can be way more ruckus than it can be in physical space where there was an actual mic, right? Where the speaker has the actual power to shut down some mics when they are becoming like rowdy or whatever, which actually happened. So like, if you think about it, maybe that can be a problem. But of course, there can be many solutions to it. But I still don't think like virtual parliaments, we are not there yet, to be honest.
But yeah, like if like Mr. Modi pushes for a digital India, especially in the classrooms where a lot of people do not have access, there's a digital divide. Can't we start from the people who are pushing them at the first place?
Yeah, true. That's very true. I mean, internet penetration right now is like, last I checked was at like 43% or something. Like 43% of our population has internet connection right now, and that's not much if you think about it. Like 1.2 billion people, with 43% is nothing. And then if you are imposing like a digital schools and we will make sure everybody goes to school digitally, not going to happen, boss, right now. Abhi nahi hone wala hai. Basically, and also you have to think about the conditions of the underprivileged, and it's just like there are so many factors involved in this that we can't even imagine, right? You know, like electricity, internet connection, availability of mobile/laptop is one of them, but then an environment conducive to study is another one, right? I was just listening to someone who was describing like how their kid was basically they were complaining about, oh, their teacher is so bad. When my child is like in classroom, I see it like the teacher is so bad, and you know, I'm like, why the hell are you looking at that class? What is wrong with you? Like, think about it. Like, you know, if your parents start looking over your shoulder when you're talking to your boss, you will not appreciate it. A classroom is a sacred space between the teacher and the student. There's a relationship working there. Now think about it. Like, if you are a person who has a family of 5 living like in a one small bedroom apartment or whatever, like it's in Bombay, how are you supposed to study even during the daytime, especially during lockdown? Like, कुछ भी teacher फेंक दो, कोई भी कर लो वहाँ पे, I doubt if anybody will be able to concentrate or figure out what is happening, and there will be like 4 people sitting behind staring at the screen and looking at, अच्छा ये पढ़ा रहे हो, अच्छा ये तो गलत है, तुम जो बोल रहे हो तो गलत है, WhatsApp पे तो नहीं पढ़ा था ये मैंने. Like, I mean, you can imagine the kind of crap that can happen, right?
Yeah.
Again, the same point I go back to policy making. When it happens, you have to think through such things. You have to imagine such scenarios, and you have to express them out loud also. Because, I mean, I have just heard stories or like imagined a lot of things that can go wrong. Policymakers can do that too, right? And it can be realistic because they have way more experience on the ground than I do. They can come up with way more imaginative and realistic scenarios than I do, right?
Yeah.
That it comes down to that.
So I'll just ask you one thing, that we have seen a lot of ruckus in the parliament in the last session, the monsoon session, which just concluded. And a lot of people are like, oh, they snapped the audio. People didn't know what was happening. But this was the first time it was happened, of course. It happened a lot of times before. But this is very funny to see our MPs climbing on tables, somebody showing a rule book to the deputy speaker's face. What was anger about? If you can just tell about what's a voice vote, what's a division, and how's the voting procedure works. If you could just explain.
So the turning off of the mic was not exactly a problem. The problem was the voice vote and the denial of the division vote, right? So the rule books say, so it's simple, right? So whenever a bill comes in and it is being considered, the speaker will say, all those in favor say aye, and certain people will say aye. All those in favor say no, and then certain people will say no. And then they will make a call, what was louder, aye or no, and then they will decide ki acha, the ayes have it or the noes have it, right? Which is like based on their interpretation of what was louder. That is the voice vote. If someone doesn't agree with it, like the voice vote, or they don't agree with the speaker, they can challenge them. So they can basically get up and say, I demand a division. Now, when they demand a division, what happens is that the gates are closed. Everybody has to go back to their seats, and there are 3 buttons in front of them: red, yellow, and green. No, abstain, and yes. And there is another button under the table. So they have to simultaneously press both buttons, whichever they want to vote. Right? They get 10 seconds to vote. Now, those votes are actually displayed on this board in front of them. So they know accurately how many ayes are there, how many noes are there, and how many abstains are there. Now, that is what the division vote is, right? So division only happens if someone demands it. But the rule book says that if someone demands it, then you have to do it. It is the speaker who has to do it, right? Compulsorily. I mean, if they didn't do it, because there were videos that came out later where you can clearly hear people screaming division, division, division. Even the minute time that Rajya Sabha was audible, wahan pe bhi you can hear like division or whatever. Now, if people are demanding division and the speaker is not doing that and just passing voice vote after voice vote, especially when even in the voice vote it's clear that the no's are louder, then it becomes like this farce, right? Where it's like, what is the point of these MPs even? मतलब तुमने ये parliament session बुलाया ही क्यों था फिर? Right? मतलब ये मजाक चल रहा है क्या basically? Right? And that's the thing. Like, so पहले ordinance pass कर दिया, 3 महीने के लिए it was a law. Then they bring in the parliament. Then 8 days later they bring in these 3 bills and वैसे भी pass कर दिए. Like procedures, क्या फर्क पड़ता है? So then वो 8 days भी रहने देने का था. Why are they even calling the parliament anymore? Right? Because what's the point anymore? So for a noob person, you have to understand that when your MP goes to parliament, they have a vote, and if they are not allowed to exercise it in the way that it is supposed to be exercised, that is a violation of your rights also. That your vote doesn't matter. Basically, they're saying your vote doesn't matter. All those people who voted for these guys don't matter. And these guys were from the Rajya Sabha, which is even more layer. Which is Rajya Sabha is indirectly elected from state assemblies, right? So they are technically representing the states. Now, as I said earlier, APMCs in different states operate in different ways, which means the Rajya Sabha becomes extremely important in this situation, where all the MPs there are all representatives of that state, the party which is in power in those states. If you're denying them, it means you're also denying states their rights. Right? So then it also means that you do not respect your federal structure anymore, right? So federal structure being centers, states, different governments, etc. Each government has their certain powers. You're just like, फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता, हम बोलेंगे वही चलने वाला है. So then why do you even need state governments then? Then if you extend that logic, I mean, it's just everything becomes a farce, right? Just because of that one action of passing a bill and denying division vote, your vote gets cancelled, federalism gets cancelled, your states have no power, farmers get cancelled, APMCs get cancelled, like everything in total gets cancelled without, allowing the democratic process to work.
Wow. I mean, that was very structured and very like to the point. And I'm sure a lot of people will probably understand that even if the intention was right, the method completely undermined how parliament works. But yeah, so maybe just like moving into like a concluding sort of question where we can just tie in two things together, which I would like to ask, which actually we would like to ask you, which is firstly, given your experience in the parliament, right? You have been there in person, seen how it works. So how is it that you should be covering parliament? What is the way in which you can get out the information about parliament which can make people understand firstly its importance if it's still there, and make them realize that it is an important part of a democratic structure? And secondly, just to tie that in with how does like the media in general, like not saying that the Indian media right now is doing a terrific job at what they're doing, but if there are there's certain restrictions on media outlets who are even allowed to cover parliamentary procedures and in the parliament, given in this recent lockdown. So is there going to be like a bias in the way which media houses are allowed and how they are going to be showing parliament, and opposed to as how it should actually be done?
So I have been struggling with this question for a while now. Like you can imagine. So the thing is that I've worked in parliament for 7 years with different MPs, right? Across party lines. I was there in UPA 2, then Modi ji, and so both sides I've seen, let's say. I've been struggling with this. First was my job of actually understanding how parliament works. Then it took a while to understand that. It was like a real education there, because so many little moving parts everywhere, bureaucracy, judiciary, layer pe layer pe layer pe layer. And unless you are in it, I doubt if anybody can actually understand it in the correct way, right? That is one. So I wouldn't really expect any citizen to sort of understand it fully. Even I don't understand it fully, right? MPs who go there for the first time and work for like a few years are still like clueless about what to do in parliament. And I've seen that happen. So I do not blame people if they do not understand what is going on in parliament. But it is the job of the people who actually can see what is happening in the parliament to communicate, right? Now, that is where the trick is. Where if you can either communicate it in a very academic way, where you're writing opinion pieces and whatever, then a certain amount of people will read it who already know how the parliament works, right? And then they will be like, "Ha, bahut nuanced opinion hai," etc. whatever. Or you can go the other way, which I am trying out like constantly, is that bring it down to such a low noob level, casual talking level, where like right now we're just having a conversation, right? Like, I've not used any heavy words. I've been telling stories or trying to explain my perspective by telling you stories or making it fun or whatever. I think that's a skill that more journalists have to learn. And not just journalists, but even commentators have to learn, right? If they actually want people, policy, especially people who are in policy and legal fields, if they care about this, if they care about people knowing more about parliament, which is important, that's what I do. So I mean, I'm saying this. I feel like first thing to do is improve your communication about how you talk about parliament, right? Do not glorify it. That's not how it works. Like, you should give people the real picture, then they understand ki, acha, isliye important hai, right? Like in school, the way they teach civics, it builds this image of this grand building in your head, which is like, oh my god, such great people sit there doing great things, great decisions, doing great awesomeness, whatever. No, that's really not true. When you work there, you know it's not true, right? And it's like they're just like us. They're just struggling like us to understand what is going on. They're also trying to educate themselves while something is happening. They're just closer to the action than you are, right? And they're actually people with power, some of them, or they're at least like casting a vote, maybe. But it's important for people to understand that glorification hasn't helped anyone. Do not glorify that institute, but also there should be like there should be a feeling of love towards it, which I do, right? So, and if you have that feeling of affection towards that institution, you want to see it fixed. It's like abhi bahut raddi chal raha hai, but I will do whatever I can to improve it, right? सालों लग जाएंगे, 20 साल लगेंगे, 25 साल लगेंगे, but I won't stop talking about it. That's it. And I will talk in a way that more and more people understand what is happening, right? I think that is the one way in which people should report, right? Now I can tell you like 100 things. Ki arey question hour dekho, arey debate dekho, arey go to the website, use the search engine, look at bills or whatever. I used to do that, but now I understand that there is another layer to it, which is first communication. So if you are able to even explain the basic concept of why Rajya Sabha is important, right? And why the farm bill being passed that way, which you said was that, that structured way that I explained, is because now I have started thinking that way, right? Where I'm thinking that, I have to explain this to people in a way that they understand, which is relevant to them. So that is important. Like people tend to talk about institutions in a way that there are some ephemeral institutions which just so disconnected from you. So forming that connection between the institution and the citizen is the most vital part of journalism, right? Or communication of policy and parliament. And I think people just do not know how to do that. And that's really tragic.
So it's 5:30 and we just hit the 1 hour mark that we're supposed to have the conversation with. I'll leave you with one last comment or a thought. So after the most asked question, itna kuch hua hai, baki kya hai, from RSS, the second most asked question is do you have an alter ego Twitter account called Alampalli, or from any other angle?
I used to be honest, but I don't anymore. I had many alts. I will not reveal whether I have any anymore. I used to have many alts. Let's just leave it at that. But at one point I was using Arnabinator during my initial days in Parliament. So
Arnab acknowledges.
I think a lot of people who will watch this interview will be students, etc. So let me tell them that, guys, if you cannot, so I'm from Newslaundry, we are a subscription model and we always say pay to keep news free because when the public pays, the public is served. But if you're a student and you cannot afford a subscription, we have a scheme going on for you, which is you can write to us and tell us that you are a student who can't afford subscriptions, and we will put you on a queue. Now, there are some very generous subscribers on the other side who give us extra money to give subscription to other people. So we will put you in that queue and we keep clearing that queue whenever we get more money from these generous donors. So please, to your viewers, etc., if you want exclusive content from Newslaundry, either pay if you can, but if you can't, please apply for this scheme and we will give you a free subscription. Do that, guys.
I can actually vouch for that because I actually applied for that when I was a student, like 5 months back, and I actually got the subscription for free. Then
that's amazing. That's amazing. See, it works, guys. I'm not scamming you. See, people even got that soap ka box also, okay? So people are like, kya de rahe hain? Sahi mein diya, boss.
But yeah, I love that actually. The one that you guys are doing, the thing about, and I think let's make debate great again. About I think I watched a couple of episodes, NL versus NL. I watched a few of the episodes. It's really good.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's and also a great job on that advertisers part of a lot of advertisers are not regulating that.
Yeah.
Especially Amul, I didn't expect it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Meghnad, for taking your time.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ratnadeep. Thanks, Muskaan.
And please continue being our part-time civics teacher.
And yeah, continue loving the parliament. We all
Yes.
need to do that a little more.
I unfortunately, I was one of those people who used to write poetry about Parliament when I used to work there. And so I think the love is going to last for a while. It just hurts, man, like to see our beautiful institution being destroyed. Like, I mean, I've learned not to like glorify it in my head. Like, that took a while first, but I still love that institution. I mean, what else do we have other than that, right? So
Exactly.
it hurts to see it not functioning well or just being bulldozed over, etc. It's just like these people just seem evil then. Like all of them, just everyone in parliament just seems so evil when you see that happening. Sad.
Yeah. But I hope 10 years down the line, if we survive in this period, when you have a conversation and when you mention that 1 year, the 8th year, when you talk about the age of the parliament, we can actually talk about some happy things that happened over the 10 years.
Right. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Youth of the country were utopic. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, thank you so much, Meghnad, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you
a great
guys.
evening.
Bye. Bye.